জাগাইছে অন্তরিক্ষের হৃদয় স্পন্দনে। ওগো বন্ধু সেই ধাবমান কাল, জড়ায় ধরিল মোরে সেই তার জাল। তুলে নিল দ্রুত রথে দুঃসাহসী ভ্রমণের পথে, তোমা হতে বহু দূরে। মনে হয় অজস্র মৃত্যুরে পার হয়ে আসিলাম। আজি নব প্রভাতের শিখর চূড়ায়, রথের চঞ্চল বেগ হাওয়ায় উড়ায় আমার পুরানো নাম। দূর হতে যদি দেখো চাহি, পারিবে না চিনতে আমার। হে বন্ধু বিদায়।
I decided to speak in English largely because as a civil servant I'm always influenced by precedents, and Merchant Bankers Association did create a precedent before in conducting the proceedings of similar meetings in English. I apologize for being unexpectedly late, and here again it seems to me that the traffic jam of Dhaka is particularly geared to creating a wedge between me and the Merchant Bankers Association. I remember there was a program organized in Purbani Hotel soon after I joined. I kept a margin of 1 hour from Uttara, where I happened to live. It took me 1 hour and a half. Today I spoke to Mr. Jamal Quddus and I told him that inshallah I will leave immediately after Maghrib prayers, which means that I should leave at about 6:30 and I should be able to reach by 7. And I reached here at 7:30. So there are conspiracies in life. We have to live with them. We can't help them. Well, let me first acknowledge my gratitude to the Merchant Bankers Association for organizing this wonderful event. Well, it is said that a fine piece of art makes time stand still. Today I felt that the songs that we heard did not simply make time stand still, but it put me at least on a transcendental journey at a supersonic speed, going back to the 50s and 60s when I was a teenager. And I'm particularly glad to see Sujit Mustafa here. His father was a couple of years senior to me. I never met him personally until today. But we spent a lot of time together. We used to live in the same hall, Muslim Hall. And I was the Assistant Commissioner Rajshahi, while Mr. Asafudullah was Additional Deputy Commissioner, and Mr. Abu Hana Mustafa Kamal was teaching in Rajshahi University. And as ambassador of the time, I had the privilege of availing of the hospitality of those of my seniors who had the fortune of being already married. And Asafudullah and Abu Hana Mustafa Kamal fell in that category. And we used to spend quite some time together. So it has been a particular pleasure for me to see Sujit Mustafa here. Well, the way the Almighty has constructed things, has shaped things on earth, is that all things come to an end, including our worst miseries. I suppose Jamal Quddus hinted that I was a misery for the capital market, if not at least for the merchant bankers. He should be glad to know that the misery has ended. Well, in the run-up to my retirement, when I was making my colleagues work too hard, and some of them were working until late at night on 21st February, and I myself was there in office until about 6 o'clock, I believe, in Delhi on that day. I did not have the time to reflect on how would retirement feel and whether I should have retired, though I knew that there was no option because it was a legal requirement. But today, as I thought back about it, I felt that I richly deserved to retire. Let me tell you why. I think the worst qualification that a chairman of the Security Exchange Commission could have is to lose control over his emotions. And today, I did lose control over my emotions. But I have one difference, that when I lost control over my emotions, I was no longer the chairman. I was 13.5-hour-old ex-chairman of SEC. Well, I've been told to say something about my experiences as SEC chairman. When a 65-year-old person is retiring, you probably need at least 6.5 hours to hear something about his experiences. But I'm sure that none of you would be willing to withstand that agony. Jal Quddus has played a really cruel joke on me. I'm sandwiched between a very wonderful musical evening that we had and a very sumptuous dinner that all of us are expecting. Now we have heard that the better part of the sandwich lies in the middle. But you have also possibly heard that exceptions prove the rule. And so this time, Ziaul Haq has proved that exceptions prove the rule by putting the worst part of the sandwich in the middle. Well, to talk about SS's experiences, let me tell you that I always felt, both as a student and in my various official capacities, that the art of a successful examinee is not merely to demonstrate one's knowledge, but also to hide one's ignorance. As far as I am concerned, especially as far as merchant banking is concerned, my only effort was directed at concealing my ignorance. I don't know to what extent I succeeded. When I joined SEC, as a student who studied economics in the US, I had heard of investment bankers, but I never heard of merchant bankers. So when I joined SEC, I used to wonder, what is a merchant bank? Is it a merchant who also does some banking? Or is it a bank which also does some function as a merchant? So I was confused, but even in my first program with the Merchant Bankers Association, I think I concealed that ignorance quite successfully. Well, but let me assure you that I did try to learn something soon thereafter, particularly about the duties and responsibilities of a merchant banker. So that's one confession that I have already made. I don't know if I need to make at least 3, but at least let me make a second confession. The second confession is that probably I could not pay enough attention to merchant banking as a segment of the capital market. I must confess that very, very honestly. It is not because I consider merchant banking to be unimportant, but as you know, in life, you have only 364 or 365 days in a year, and you have only 24 hours in a day. And it is in the human nature that you are overwhelmed by what is considered urgent, but not necessarily what is important. So, in my case, even though I always considered merchant banking to be an integral and a very valuable part of the integrated chain of the elements of capital market, I'm afraid I could not pay enough attention. So let me make that confession very, very honestly. The present relationship between SEC and merchant banks is, as it seems to me, SEC has actually become a merchant. It has not yet become a bank, but it has actually become a merchant as far as the merchant bankers are concerned. My colleagues might feel very hard, but the fact is that we normally receive an annual fee of 10,000 taka. We give you a commodity called the registration, and then we don't know what we are doing with it. So that basically we have been behaving like a merchant who sells a commodity to a consumer and doesn't care what the consumer is doing with that item purchased. Internal SSC committee to begin with, headed by Mr. Mansoor Alam, to examine the methodology by which we can monitor the performance of merchant banks, both in their quantitative dimension and in their qualitative dimension. And I would expect this committee, as it prepares the guidelines, to be also in contact with the Merchant Bankers Association to see how best the guideline can be prepared in a manner that provides a sound basis for a more meaningful and a constructive relationship between the SSC and merchant banks. Well, Mr. Jawar Quddus has mentioned that we have done things which might eliminate merchant banking as a business. I had mentioned, I think, in a program which was organized by the Dhaka Stock Exchange and Chittagong Stock Exchange jointly, that I was in a OECD organized roundtable in Tokyo just maybe 3-4 months back. And that roundtable had a representation of many SEC chairmen from the Asian region. There was one in a thick skin anymore. I can have a thin skin now, but I'm sure that my colleagues present here would have the thick skin. But let me tell you that what we have done is to reduce the maximum fee that you might get either through managing an IPO or through underwriting. And if you recall, you told me that in most cases, you never got anywhere near the maximum. So basically, the change has done nothing more than simply legalize what is actually happening. So I'm afraid that SEC has not really reduced your actual intake, though it might appear on paper that SEC has reduced your fees. Secondly, I should also like to tell you that we have made it mandatory now for companies with 50 crore of paid up capital, when they raise more capital, when they come to us for consent, they will be required to raise a certain portion of their capital through IPO and apply. Well, I have already spoken long enough, I guess, and after listening to the sonorous music that you have heard, I don't want to pound your eardrums with a boring speech. But some of you at least have privately told me, and Mr. Manjurur Rahman also publicly announced here today, that he considered me to be a market-friendly chairman. Well, I certainly do not claim that I came, I saw, and I conquered. But I do hope that you remember me not as someone who came, who saw, who warmed the chair, and who disappeared into the sunset. I wish you all good health, prosperous business, and as I mentioned in the course of the raffle draw, I will certainly be an observer of what is happening in the capital market of Bangladesh, and if there is any way I can make a contribution, I will be glad to do it. Thank you very much.
অনেক ধন্যবাদ আপনাদেরকে। আশা করি এখন আমাদের অনুষ্ঠান আমরা শেষ ঘোষণা করতে পারি।
And then it's now is in Cameroon. We have been very system.
আমরা কি মধ্যে গিয়ে রাত দিয়ে ফেলেছো না আমি